Evelyn Cross wasn't just beautiful, she was precision incarnated. At 32, she had built Cross Design Collective from nothing into a multi-million-dollar empire. Fashion magazines called her the Queen of Manhattan Elegance. Her clients included governors, celebrities, and old-money families who trusted no one else with their most intimate spaces. But her greatest design project? Transforming Lucian Moretti, the dangerous outsider with whispered Mafia connections, into Manhattan's most legitimate power player. For 6 years, she had been his partner, his confidant, his bridge to a world that would have devoured him without her protection. She had loved him with the kind of certainty that comes only once in a lifetime. And in a single afternoon, she would discover that certainty was just another word for blindness. The champagne was Dom Perignon, chilled to exactly 42 degrees. The lighting in Maison Laurent's private fitting suite was orchestrated to make every bride look like she was already walking through her wedding day dream. And the dress, oh, the dress was a masterpiece that made angels weep with envy. Evelyn stood on the raised platform, surrounded by mirrors that captured her from every conceivable angle. The gown moved like liquid moonlight, ivory silk that whispered against her skin, French lace so delicate it seemed woven from spider webs and starlight, a cathedral train that would cascade down marble steps like a river of impossible dreams. She looked like a queen. She felt invincible. She had no idea she was standing at the precipice of her own destruction. Absolutely stunning, Margot breathed, her French accent thick with the satisfaction of an artist who has created something transcendent. Monsieur Moretti will forget how to breathe when he sees you, chérie. This is not just a dress, this is destiny. Evelyn smiled. After 6 years with Lucian Moretti, she had perfected the art of smiles. This was her serene bride smile, the expression that said she was a woman who had found everything she had ever searched for in the chaos of the universe. And hadn't she? Lucian Moretti wasn't just handsome, though his dark eyes could make even the most jaded Manhattan socialite forget her carefully constructed indifference. He wasn't just wealthy, though his real estate empire stretched across 3 states like a kingdom carved from steel and ambition. He was power incarnate, the kind of man who walked into rooms and changed their gravitational pull, who spoke softly because he never needed to raise his voice to command absolute obedience. Yes, there were rumors. Whispers that slithered through cocktail parties and boardrooms like smoke, about his family's connections, about business dealings that existed in the shadows between legal and catastrophic, about dangerous men who appeared in his offices when honest people were sleeping. But Evelyn had spent 6 years as his greatest asset. She had introduced him to the right people, taught him which charities actually mattered versus which ones were just tax shelters for the guilty, which galas to attend, which politicians to court with campaign donations instead of threats that left bodies in the Hudson. Together, they had built something extraordinary. In 72 hours, they would make it eternal. The bustle needs one more adjustment, Margot murmured, circling Evelyn like a sculptor examining her life's work. The way it drapes when you turn, it must be poetry, not merely fabric. Give me just 10 minutes, oui? There's champagne in the lounge and those little raspberry macarons you adore. I'm fine here, Evelyn protested, but Margot was already bustling toward the door with the determination of a woman on a sacred mission. Non, you must relax, chérie. This is your moment to dream, not to stand like a department store mannequin. Go. Sit. Breathe. I will summon you when perfection is achieved. Before Evelyn could mount another protest, Margot had swept out in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and creative passion, leaving her alone with her reflection and the quiet Thursday afternoon light filtering through the salon's palatial windows. Evelyn stepped down from the platform carefully, the gown's weight still unfamiliar, still magical, and moved toward the small antique settee positioned near the window. From this vantage point, she could see Fifth Avenue below, the yellow river of taxis, the hurried pedestrians clutching their ambitions and disappointments, the whole magnificent chaos of Manhattan on a day that felt suspended between seasons. In 72 hours, she would walk down the aisle of St. Patrick's Cathedral. 500 guests. An 8-piece orchestra that had played for presidents and princes. Flowers shipped overnight from Ecuador and the south of France. The wedding would be featured in town and country, and the reception at the plaza would be dissected and envied for years. Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself sink into the fantasy for one perfect, suspended moment. The dress. The cathedral. Lucian waiting at the altar in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, looking at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever whispered to the universe in his moments of doubt. That's when she heard them. The voices came from the other side of the ornate dressing screen that separated her fitting room from the adjacent suite. Maison Laurent catered exclusively to clients who valued absolute privacy. Each space was supposed to be soundproofed, isolated, discreet as a confessional. But the screen was merely decorative, not functional. And the voices on the other side were crystal clear, sharp as broken glass. "You're glowing." A man's voice, low, intimate, thick with desire. "I can't stop looking at you. You're more beautiful every time I see you." Evelyn's eyes opened. The fantasy shattered like a champagne flute dropped on marble. She knew that voice. It belonged to the man who whispered to her in the dark, who called her Bellissima and promised her the world and every star contained within it. Lucian. The name caught in her throat like a piece of her own breaking heart. "I wanted to tell her so many times," Layla continued, and now her voice carried a mix of guilt and defiance that made Evelyn's stomach turn. "Did you see her face yesterday when she was going through the seating chart? So serious, so focused on making sure everything was perfect. She kept asking me to confirm which of your business associates needed to be seated near the family section, making sure everyone was comfortable, everyone was honored." Layla's laugh was bitter now. "I almost burst out laughing right there in her office. She was planning your wedding reception with such care, and the whole time. She's good at details," Lucian said. "That's what makes her valuable. She thinks if she manages every variable, controls every outcome, she can make the world behave according to her design principles. It's endearing in a tedious way." "Do you love her at all?" Layla asked. "Even a little bit?" The pause that followed was longer than it should have been. Longer than a lie needed. Long enough to be the truth. "I respect her," Lucian finally said. "She's been exactly what I needed. The perfect polished surface to hide what's underneath." Evelyn Cross, the brilliant design executive with the impeccable reputation and the society connections that go back 4 generations. She made me legitimate, opened doors that would have stayed welded shut to a Moretti. Transformed me from a threat into a trophy husband. "That's not nothing. That's not an answer," Layla pressed. "It's the only answer that matters," Lucian replied. "Love is for people who have the luxury of choosing based on feelings. I chose based on strategy. And in 3 days, that strategy becomes permanent, legally binding, and absolutely bulletproof. I'll have everything I need." Evelyn's fingers had gone numb. She looked down and realized she was gripping the settee so hard her knuckles had turned white against the ivory silk of her gloves, the gloves she'd spent 2 weeks choosing because she wanted everything to be perfect. She wanted to scream. To tear through the screen like a hurricane and confront them both. To rip off this ridiculous dress and burn it in the middle of Fifth Avenue while tourists took photographs and the city watched her world end in flames. Instead, she did something that surprised even herself. She reached into the small beaded clutch she'd set on the settee and pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady as she opened the voice recording app. Steady as she pressed the red circle. Steady as she held the phone up toward the screen, capturing every word of the conversation that was methodically destroying her life. "What happens after?" Layla's voice had gone quieter now, vulnerable. "After the wedding? After you're married to her?" "After the wedding, nothing changes," Lucian said with absolute confidence. "Evelyn will be my wife, beautiful, accomplished, perfect for photographs and charity galas and making me look like a man who has evolved beyond his family's reputation. And you'll be mine in the ways that actually matter." Discreet, protected, cherished in private. She'll find out eventually, Layla said. She's too smart not to. Lucian laughed, the same warm, indulgent laugh he'd given Evelyn 1,000 times when she worried about details, when she planned contingencies, when she tried to control the uncontrollable. Evelyn sees exactly what she wants to see, he said. She spent 6 years convincing herself that I'm a reformed bad boy who just needed the love of a good woman to become respectable. She believes her own fairy tale. She's written the script in her head, the narrative arc where love conquers darkness and we live happily ever after in our perfectly designed brownstone. Why would she question it now? Why would she look for evidence that contradicts the story she's so invested in believing? Because I'm pregnant, Layla said flatly. Because that's not exactly subtle. Because biology doesn't care about fairy tales. By the time anyone notices, I'll be married and legally untouchable, Lucian replied. And you'll be taken care of. The apartment in Brooklyn I bought under the shell company, completely untraceable. The trust fund I'm establishing for the baby, offshore, secure, absolutely protected. Everything will be perfect, compartmentalized, clean. Evelyn will have her marriage and her legitimacy. You'll have security and our child. I'll have everything I've worked for. Everyone wins. Evelyn's thumb pressed down on the screen, making sure the recording was still active. Capturing every word. Every casual cruelty. Every calculated manipulation. Every piece of evidence she would need. I love you, Layla whispered, and the words sounded like a confession and a question all at once. I know I shouldn't. I know it's wrong, but I do. I love you so much it terrifies me. I know, Lucian said, and Evelyn could hear the smile in his voice again, the smile of a man who was winning at a game where everyone else didn't even know they were playing. You're so beautifully uncomplicated, so refreshingly honest. You have no idea what a relief that is after years of Evelyn's endless analysis and strategic planning of every moment of our lives. The sound of a kiss. Soft, intimate, the kind of kiss that meant something beyond strategy. Evelyn stood there in her wedding dress, the dress that had taken 4 months to design and create, the dress she'd dreamed about since she was a little girl watching fairy tales, recording the sound of her fiancé kissing her assistant. And she felt something inside her that had been soft and warm and trusting for 6 years turn to ice. Not cold, ice. Hard, clear, sharp enough to cut through steel, focused enough to destroy empires. The voices moved away from the screen, toward the door of the other fitting room, still talking in low murmurs that the recording would capture even as Evelyn could no longer distinguish individual words. Then the door opened and closed with a soft click, and they were gone. Evelyn stood alone in the afternoon light, surrounded by mirrors that showed her from every angle in the dress she would never wear, the life she would never live, the future that had just been revealed as fiction. She pressed stop on the recording. Checked to make sure it had saved properly, 12 minutes and 43 seconds of evidence. Then she opened her messages and sent 3 texts in rapid succession, her fingers moving with surgical precision. The first was to her lawyer, need to see you tonight. Emergency. Clear your schedule. The second was to Marcus, her other assistant who handled her personal affairs, clear my schedule for tomorrow. All day. Don't tell anyone. Don't ask questions. The third was to herself, a reminder, do not cry. Do not break. Do not give them the satisfaction. This is war now. And wars are won by the prepared. She stood there for another moment, looking at her reflection in the 3-way mirror. The dress really was perfect. The bride in the mirror looked radiant, glowing, like someone on the threshold of eternal happiness. But the woman wearing the dress was already planning a war so elegant, so devastating, so perfectly executed that Lucian Moretti would never see it coming until it was far too late. When Margot returned 15 minutes later, humming a French love song and carrying pins and thread, she found Evelyn exactly where she'd left her, poised, serene, smiling that perfect practiced smile. I think the bustle is perfection now, Sherry, Margot announced. Come, let me show you. Let me make the final adjustments so you can be the most beautiful bride Manhattan has ever witnessed. Evelyn stepped back onto the platform and let Margot fuss with the fabric, making minute adjustments that didn't matter anymore because this dress would never see the inside of St. Patrick's Cathedral. She watched her reflection turn and pose and move exactly as a bride should, her mind already 3 steps ahead, already calculating, already designing the perfect revenge. You're so calm, Margot observed, pinning a final fold with the precision of a master craftsman. Most brides at this stage are nervous wrecks, crying, second-guessing, panicking about every detail. But you? You look like you don't have a care in the world. Like you found perfect peace. Evelyn met her own eyes in the mirror. Her reflection stared back, composed, beautiful, deadly. I've learned that staying calm is the best revenge, she said quietly. Margot laughed, not understanding. Revenge for what, Sherry? For being underestimated, Evelyn replied. The apartment Evelyn shared with Lucian occupied the top 2 floors of a converted brownstone in the West Village, the kind of property that cost more than most people would earn in 3 lifetimes. It was beautiful in that studied, expensive way that spoke of professional designers and unlimited budgets, exposed brick and modern art, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Manhattan like a living painting, custom furniture that had been featured in Architectural Digest. Every surface had been carefully curated to project success, taste, power. Evelyn had designed most of it herself, back when she still believed she was building a home instead of a showroom for Lucian's transformation from dangerous outsider to society darling. She arrived at 7:30 p.m. Lucian's car wasn't in the private garage yet, which meant he was still at whatever meeting had supposedly kept him busy all afternoon. Or still with Layla, planning their secret future while Evelyn planned their very public wedding. The thought didn't even hurt anymore. Just 3 hours after the salon, and already the pain had crystallized into something harder, clearer, infinitely more dangerous. She took the private elevator to the main floor and walked through rooms that suddenly felt like a stranger's home, beautiful, expensive, completely hollow. Everything looked exactly the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. In the master bedroom, she changed out of her day clothes with mechanical precision. Removed the pearl necklace Lucian had given her for Christmas. Washed her face clean of the makeup she'd applied this morning when she still believed in fairy tales. Pulled on yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, the kind of casual comfort she wore when it was just the 2 of them, when Lucian would pull her into his lap and call her beautiful without makeup, when she'd actually believed he meant it. She was sitting in the library with a glass of wine and a book she wasn't reading when she heard his key in the lock. Evelyn? His voice carried through the apartment, warm and familiar. Are you home? She took a breath. Arranged her face into the expression she needed, loving, trusting, completely unsuspecting. In here, she called back, her voice perfectly steady. Lucian appeared in the doorway moments later, still wearing his suit from whatever meeting he'd actually attended, or said he'd attended. He was 42 but looked younger, the kind of effortless handsomeness that came from good genes and better tailoring. Dark hair starting to silver at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished rather than old. Eyes that could shift from warm to absolutely cold in a heartbeat. The kind of smile that made people want to trust him even when every instinct screamed otherwise. He'd used that smile on her for 6 years. She'd fallen for it every single time. There's my beautiful bride, he said, crossing the room to kiss her forehead like he had 1,000 times before. How was the fitting? Evelyn accepted the kiss without flinching, without pulling away, without letting even a flicker of knowledge cross her face. Perfect, she said. Margot is a genius. The dress is, it's everything I dreamed it would be. I have no doubt you'll look stunning. He poured himself a scotch from the bar cart, 18-year-old single malt that cost more per bottle than some people's monthly rent, and settled into the chair across from her. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see. You know I would have if tradition allowed it. You'll see in 3 days, Evelyn said, smiling that practiced smile. Tradition and all that. Tradition, Lucian repeated, his own smile indulgent. You and your traditions, your rules, your perfect plans. I love that about you, you know. The way you make order out of chaos. Do you? Evelyn thought. Or do you just find it useful? Do you love me, or do you love how perfectly I've served your purposes? How was your day? She asked instead, keeping her voice light, interested, completely normal. Productive, Lucian said, taking a sip of his scotch, utterly relaxed. Signed the papers on the Chelsea property. That development is going to transform the entire neighborhood. Had lunch with the development team. Spent the afternoon reviewing contracts with the lawyers. He smiled. The usual Thursday chaos. Every word a lie. Or at least every word designed to hide a truth that would destroy her if she didn't already know it. Evelyn watched him over the rim of her wine glass and marveled at how easy it was for him. How smoothly the deception rolled off his tongue. How completely he believed she would accept it, swallow it whole, ask for more. I've been thinking, she said carefully, setting down her wine and leaning forward slightly. About the business. About making sure everything is protected as we move forward into this next chapter. Lucian raised an eyebrow. Protected how? Legacy planning. Asset protection. Making sure that if anything ever happened, which it won't, but if it did, everything we've built together would be secure. Protected from external threats, business competitors, economic downturns. She paused. I spoke with my lawyer last month. She suggested we might want to formalize some additional protections beyond the prenup. The prenup is comprehensive, Lucian said, and she saw it, the slightest shift in his posture, the subtle tension that meant she'd triggered something in his strategic brain. My lawyers spent months drafting it. I know, and it's excellent for personal assets. But you're expanding so rapidly, the new developments, the international properties, the potential IPO you mentioned. It might be wise to have some additional corporate structures in place. Corporate veils, liability shields, that kind of thing. She smiled warmly. It's what I'd advise any of my clients in your position. You're not my interior designer, Carissima, Lucian said softly. You're going to be my wife. Which is exactly why I want to make sure you're protected, Evelyn said smoothly, her voice carrying just the right amount of loving concern. The prenup protects our personal assets in case of divorce, which will never happen, obviously. But your business empire needs additional safeguards, especially with the IPO discussions you mentioned last month. If you're going to take the company public, you need ironclad structures in place. That got his attention. Lucian's company going public was his ultimate goal, the final transformation from dangerous outsider with whispered mafia connections to legitimate business titan whose stock was traded on the New York Stock Exchange. What kind of safeguards? He asked. Just some corporate restructuring. Updated operating agreements. Cleaner liability separation between your various entities. Evelyn picked up her wine again, keeping her voice casual, professional, helpful. My lawyer drafted something very standard. It would formalize your control position while protecting against any potential future challenges from business partners, disgruntled investors, that kind of thing. She was lying. The documents waiting in her lawyer's office were anything but standard. They were a trap so sophisticated, so beautifully constructed, that Lucian wouldn't see the teeth until they'd already closed around his entire empire. But Lucian didn't know that. Because Lucian thought she was exactly what he'd said she was, meticulous, detail-oriented, blindly trustworthy, the kind of woman who would never think to question him, much less strategically destroy him. I'd need to have my lawyers review anything like that, Lucian said carefully. Of course. I wouldn't expect anything less. Evelyn smiled. Although we're running out of time before the wedding. If you want this in place before we're legally married, which would be cleaner from a tax perspective and give you better protection, we'd need to move quickly. Like, within the next 48 hours. She watched him calculate. Watched him weigh the risks against the benefits. Watched him decide whether this was worth his immediate attention or just another one of Evelyn's well-intentioned attempts to help manage his empire. "Send me the documents," he said finally. "I'll have my team look at them first thing tomorrow morning." "Perfect." Evelyn stood, crossing to him with the grace of a woman who'd spent years perfecting every movement. She settled into his lap the way she had 1,000 times before, the familiar ritual of intimacy that suddenly felt like theater. She let him wrap his arms around her. Breathed in the expensive cologne he wore, Tom Ford, custom blended, $800 per bottle. Felt the solid warmth of his chest against her cheek. "I just want us to be protected," she whispered. "Everything we've built together, I want to make sure it lasts forever." Lucian's hand came up to stroke her hair, his fingers gentle, familiar, completely convincing. "Forever," he repeated. "I like the sound of that, Bellissima." Evelyn closed her eyes and let him hold her, knowing it was probably the last time she would let him touch her without wanting to scream. "I love you," she whispered, because it was what she was supposed to say. Because he expected it. Because the performance required it. "I love you too," Lucian replied automatically, the words as empty as everything else he'd ever said to her. Evelyn wondered if he even noticed he was lying. Or if the lies had become so natural that he couldn't tell the difference anymore. Rebecca Chen's law office occupied the 38th floor of a steel and glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. She was 53, ruthlessly brilliant, and famous across New York's legal circles for destroying powerful men who thought their money and influence made them bulletproof. Evelyn had hired her 6 months ago to review the prenuptial agreement Lucian's lawyers had drafted. Rebecca had recommended against signing, had pointed out a dozen ways the document was weighted heavily in Lucian's favor, had suggested amendments that would have given Evelyn actual protection instead of the illusion of fairness. Evelyn had ignored her advice and signed anyway, blinded by love and trust and the beautiful lie she'd been living. Now she was back, sitting across from Rebecca's massive mahogany desk at 8 a.m. on a Friday morning, with a leather portfolio containing documents, recordings, and 6 years of carefully kept records. "I was wrong," Evelyn said without preamble, before Rebecca could even offer coffee. "You were right. I should have listened to you. I should have protected myself. I should have seen what he was." Rebecca's expression didn't change. She was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost $5,000, her silver hair pulled back in a sleek bun, her eyes sharp as surgical instruments. "You're here now," she said simply. "Tell me everything." Evelyn told her everything. The conversation at the salon. Layla's pregnancy. Lucian's cold, calculated manipulation. The realization that their entire relationship, 6 years of her life, 6 years of trust and love and partnership, had been nothing more than a strategic acquisition disguised as romance. When she finished, Rebecca sat back in her leather chair and steepled her fingers, her expression thoughtful. "The prenup is a problem," she said bluntly. "You signed away most of your leverage. In a standard divorce, you'd walk away with almost nothing. You made sure of that by trusting him." "I know," Evelyn said. Her voice was steady. "But I'm not here for a standard divorce, am I?" Rebecca's smile was sharp, predatory, the smile of a lawyer who lived for cases exactly like this. "No," she said. "You're here to make sure he loses everything. So let's talk about how we make that happen. Tell me about his business operations. Everything you know. Every detail, no matter how small." She stayed in his arms for exactly 5 more minutes. Then she excused herself to take a bath, leaving him with his scotch and his secrets and his absolute certainty that he had everything under control. In the bathroom, with the door locked and the water running to cover any sound, Evelyn finally let herself cry. But only for 3 minutes. Then she washed her face, studied her reflection in the mirror, controlled her breathing with the techniques she'd learned in the yoga classes Lucian had given her for her birthday, and opened her phone to the recording she'd made that afternoon. She listened to the whole thing twice, forcing herself to hear every word, every casual cruelty, every calculated betrayal. Every time Lucian called her exhausting. Every time he described their relationship as strategic. Every time he made it absolutely clear that she was a tool, an asset, a means to an end. Then she forwarded the entire recording to her lawyer with a single message. "This is what we're working with. I want him destroyed. Completely. Permanently. I want him to lose everything he's built on my back." The response came back in under a minute. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. Bring everything you have. We go to war." Evelyn smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red from crying, but they were also hard, focused, burning with a purpose that felt almost religious in its intensity. 3 days until the wedding. 72 hours to build a trap sophisticated enough to catch a man who thought he was already untouchable. She could work with that. This was where 6 years of being Lucian's partner became useful in ways he never could have imagined. Evelyn had spent years helping him build his empire. Attending meetings. Reviewing contracts. Introducing him to investors and politicians and society figures who would never have given him the time of day without her seal of approval, her guarantee that he was legitimate, safe, reformed. She knew where the money came from. She knew which developments were legitimate and which were covers for something darker. She knew about the offshore accounts and the shell companies and the business partners who showed up in the middle of the night and left before dawn. She'd known for years. She'd just chosen to believe Lucian when he said he was leaving that life behind, that he was becoming the man she saw in him, that her love was transforming him. Now she laid it all out for Rebecca like a map to buried treasure. "He's been moving money," Evelyn said. "Large amounts. I didn't pay close attention before, I thought it was just normal business operations. But last month I noticed some transfers that didn't make sense. Moving funds between accounts for developments that don't exist yet. Shell companies I'd never heard of receiving payments for services that were never actually rendered. Consultants who don't seem to exist outside of paperwork." Rebecca's eyes had sharpened to laser focus. "Do you have proof?" "I have access to our joint accounts. And I have login credentials for several of his business accounts. He gave them to me last year when he wanted me to review some contracts, when he was trying to show me how much he trusted me, how transparent he was being." Evelyn pulled out her laptop. "I haven't looked deeply. But if there's something there." "There's something there," Rebecca said grimly. "Men like Moretti always have something there. The question is whether it's enough to override the prenup and destroy him completely." "The prenup?" Evelyn said slowly. "You said it's airtight." "It is," Rebecca confirmed. "But what if he violated the terms?" "What terms?" "There's a morality clause," Rebecca said, pulling up a document on her computer. "Standard language about fidelity and conduct befitting the marriage. I remember my associate adding it to the draft. I thought it was just boilerplate at the time, something to make you feel protected even though the rest of the agreement was weighted toward him." "It is boilerplate," Evelyn said. "Isn't it?" "Boilerplate can be incredibly useful if properly triggered," Rebecca replied, reading through the document. "The clause states that in the event of infidelity or moral turpitude, the injured party may seek remedy, including but not limited to adjusted asset division. And..." She stopped, read further, and her smile widened. "Immediate vesting of any voting rights or control positions contingent on the marriage." Evelyn felt her heart start to race. "What does that mean?" "It means your fiancé was very clever," Rebecca said. "Too clever for his own good. Look at this." She turned her monitor so Evelyn could see. Buried in the corporate structure documents attached to the prenup, there's a provision that upon marriage, you'll be granted voting rights in his holding company. Minority voting rights, not enough to control anything, but rights nonetheless. And there's a clause that says those rights vest immediately upon marriage and can only be revoked in the event of divorce or death. I don't understand, Evelyn said. Why would he give me voting rights at all? He structured it so that you'd have just enough stake to be useful. Legitimate, respectable Evelyn Cross with her shares in the Moretti empire, sitting on the board, making him look transparent and trustworthy. But not enough to actually threaten his control. You'd be window dressing. The perfect trophy wife with just enough power to validate his legitimacy but not enough to ever challenge him. Except? Evelyn prompted, seeing where this was going. Rebecca's smile widened into something almost feral. Except if he violates the morality clause before the marriage is finalized, the rights vest anyway, but the control provisions are voided. Which means you'd have voting rights in the company, but he'd lose his guaranteed control position. Not just him, look here. Rebecca pointed to another section of the document. His business partners also have contingent control positions that vest on different triggers. If his position is voided due to moral turpitude, it triggers a cascade effect. The whole control structure falls apart like dominoes. Evelyn stared at the documents, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. He wrote his own trap, she whispered. He wrote a very sophisticated trap designed to protect his empire from external threats, Rebecca corrected. He just never imagined you'd be the one to spring it. He never thought the meticulous, detail-oriented, blindly loyal Evelyn Cross would have the ruthlessness to destroy him. They spent the next 4 hours going through everything. The recordings from the salon. The financial records Evelyn could access through their joint accounts and the business credentials Lucian had given her. The corporate documents. The prenup. The intricate web of companies and accounts and relationships that made up Lucian's empire. By the time they finished, it was dark outside and Evelyn's head was spinning with information, strategy, and the cold mathematics of revenge. Here's what we know, Rebecca said, making notes on a legal pad with precise, economical handwriting. 1. He's having an affair with your assistant. 2. She's pregnant with his child. 3. He's been moving money in ways that strongly suggest either tax fraud, money laundering, or both. 4. He's about to marry you under completely false pretenses while planning to maintain the affair indefinitely. And 5. If we can prove the infidelity before the wedding, we can trigger the morality clause and destroy his corporate control structure. But proving it means confronting him, Evelyn said. Which means he'll know. Which means he'll find a way to protect himself, Rebecca finished. Men like Moretti always do. They're survivors. They have contingency plans for their contingency plans. We need something better than just proof of an affair. We need something that makes him untouchable in the worst possible way. Something that brings down his whole empire and makes him radioactive to everyone who's helped him build it. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Layla has proof, she said finally. Text messages. Probably emails. Maybe financial records of the apartment he bought her, the expenses he's been covering, the trust fund he mentioned setting up for the baby. If I can get her to turn on him. Can you? Rebecca interrupted. Get her to turn on him? I think so, Evelyn said slowly. I heard it in her voice at the salon. She's terrified. Scared of him, scared of what happens if this falls apart. Scared of being a single mother with a child whose father is a criminal. If I approach her the right way, position it as protection for her and the baby, she'll turn on him to save herself, Rebecca finished. It's worth trying. But Evelyn, if you do this, there's no going back. Once we start moving pieces on the board, he'll notice. He's too smart not to. And he'll fight back with everything he has. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for war? Evelyn thought about the dress hanging in her closet at home, wrapped in protective plastic and dreams. About the cathedral reservation and the florist orders and the 500 guests who would be expecting a wedding in 48 hours. She thought about Lucian's voice saying she's been exactly what I needed, like she was a tool he'd used and was preparing to discard. She thought about Layla, pregnant and naive and probably terrified, being used by a man who would sacrifice her the moment it became convenient. "I'm ready," Evelyn said. Layla Mercer lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn, or at least that's what Evelyn had always thought. Now, driving through the darkened streets toward the address Rebecca's investigator had provided, Evelyn realized how little she actually knew about the woman who'd worked beside her for 2 years. The building was in Dumbo, a renovated warehouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman and monthly rents that would have been absolutely impossible on an assistant's salary, even a well-paid assistant working for one of Manhattan's top design firms. Evelyn pulled into a parking spot across the street and sat there for a moment, studying the building. Lights glowed behind expensive curtains. People who could afford to live here didn't worry about money. People who had wealthy benefactors paying their rent didn't have to choose between groceries and utilities. She checked her phone. 8:47 p.m. Late enough that Layla would be home. Early enough to plausibly claim this was a spontaneous visit from a concerned employer. Evelyn took a breath, checked her appearance in the rearview mirror. She'd dressed carefully for this meeting, expensive but not threatening, polished but approachable. The kind of outfit that said she was here as a friend, not an employer about to destroy someone's life. The doorman barely glanced at her when she walked in, radiating the confidence of someone who absolutely belonged. "I'm here to see Layla Mercer," Evelyn said. "She's expecting me." A lie, but an effective one. The doorman waved her toward the elevator without question. Apartment 6C. Evelyn pressed the buzzer and waited, her heart pounding despite her outward calm. When the door opened, Layla's face went completely white. "Evelyn," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you? How did you? Can I come in?" Evelyn asked quietly. "We need to talk." For a moment, she thought Layla might slam the door. Instead, after a long hesitation that spoke volumes, Layla stepped back and let her enter. The apartment was beautiful. Hardwood floors and exposed brick, modern furniture that looked like it came from the same boutique suppliers Evelyn used for her high-end clients, expensive art on the walls. The kind of place that screamed money, power, someone taking very good care of someone else. The kind of place Lucian would buy for a mistress he wanted to keep comfortable and quiet and completely dependent. "Nice place," Evelyn said, looking around with professional appreciation. "How long have you lived here?" 6 months, Layla's voice was barely audible. "Must be expensive." "I have a roommate," Layla said quickly. The lie was reflexive, automatic. Evelyn turned to look at her, really look at her. Layla was 26 and beautiful in that effortless way of youth. Clear skin, bright eyes, the kind of natural prettiness that didn't need much enhancement. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that didn't quite hide the small swell of her stomach. 3 months, maybe 4. Not showing yet to anyone who wasn't looking for it specifically. "Layla," Evelyn said gently, "I heard you at the salon yesterday afternoon." "I was in the next fitting room." The color drained from Layla's face completely. She looked like she might faint. "I heard everything," Evelyn continued, keeping her voice soft, non-threatening. "Every single word." Layla sank onto the couch like her legs had given out. "Oh my God. How long?" Evelyn asked. "How long have you been sleeping with my fiancé?" Layla's hands were shaking violently. "A year. Maybe a little longer." "I'm so sorry, A year." While Evelyn had been planning the wedding. While she'd been introducing Lucian to her most important clients, building his reputation, believing in their future together. "Does he love you?" Evelyn asked. Layla looked up, clearly surprised by the question. He says he does." "Do you believe him?" The pause was telling. Heartbreaking, really. I want to, Layla finally whispered. Evelyn sat down on the chair across from her, the movement deliberate, non-threatening. Can I tell you what I think? I think Lucian Moretti is very, very good at making women believe exactly what he needs them to believe. I think he told me he loved me for 6 years while planning exactly how to use me to build his empire. And I think he's telling you he loves you while planning exactly how to use you and your baby. You don't know him like I do, Layla protested, but her voice was weak, unconvinced. Don't I? Evelyn leaned forward. I know he bought you this apartment through a shell company, so there's no paper trail connecting it to him. I know he's been transferring money to offshore accounts to pay for your expenses without leaving evidence. I know he spent a year sleeping with both of us while planning a wedding that was never about love, it was about legitimacy and power and control. Tears were streaming down Layla's face now. He said he was going to leave you. After the wedding, after everything was settled. He's not going to leave me, Evelyn interrupted softly. Because I'm useful. I'm the respectable face he needs for his empire. You're the mistress he keeps hidden, compartmentalized. And if anything goes wrong, if any of this threatens his position, he'll sacrifice both of us without a second thought. That's not true, Layla whispered, but she didn't sound convinced. Layla was silent for a long time. There are texts, she finally said. Emails. He's been sloppy lately. I think he stopped worrying about leaving evidence. Because he thinks he's already won, Evelyn said. Because in 48 hours, he'll be married to me and untouchable. What are you going to do? Evelyn stood. I'm going to make sure he faces consequences for what he's done. To both of us. To everyone he's used and manipulated. But I need your help. Layla looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. Why should I trust you? Because unlike Lucian, I'm telling you the truth, Evelyn said. And because deep down, you already know I'm right. She left her business card on the coffee table. Send everything to that email address. Tonight, if you can. And Layla, don't tell him I was here. Don't tell him anything. Just send the proof and let me handle the rest. Evelyn leaned forward. When did he set up this apartment? When did the money transfers start? Last year. After things got serious between us. And when did his business expansion really take off? When did the major development deals start closing? Layla was quiet, thinking. It's the same timeline, isn't it? Evelyn pressed. He started sleeping with you right around the time he started using my contacts and my reputation to secure funding for his projects. I was opening doors for him in Manhattan society while you were, what? Keeping him entertained? Making him feel young and powerful? It wasn't like that, Layla said, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. Then what was it like? Evelyn asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like he's been running a very sophisticated con on both of us. Using me for legitimacy and connections, using you for. She gestured at Layla's stomach. Layla's hand moved protectively to the small swell. I'm pregnant with his child. He can't just. He can do whatever he wants, Evelyn said flatly. He's a Moretti. Men like him don't leave paper trails. Don't leave witnesses. Don't leave problems unsolved. She paused, letting that sink in. What do you think happens if this comes out? If people find out he's been cheating on his fiancée with her own assistant, that there's a baby? He said it wouldn't matter, Layla whispered. That once you were married, it would all be fine. Compartmentalized. Compartmentalized, Evelyn repeated. That's a very clinical word for your child. Layla flinched. I'm not here to hurt you, Evelyn said, gentling her tone. I'm here to help you. Because I think you're in danger. I think we both are. Lucian wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Lie? Manipulate? Use people as tools and discard them when they become inconvenient? Evelyn pulled out her phone. I recorded the conversation at the salon. Do you want to hear it? Hear him describe exactly what you mean to him? Layla shook her head frantically. No. Please. He called me a beautiful, meticulous control freak. Said I was exhausting. Said you were refreshingly honest and beautifully uncomplicated. Evelyn watched Layla's face carefully. Do those sound like compliments to you? Or do they sound like a man who sees both of us as means to an end? Layla was crying harder now, her whole body shaking. What do you want from me? She finally asked. I want proof, Evelyn said simply. Text messages, emails, financial records, anything that shows what's really been happening. And I want you to understand that if this falls apart, when this falls apart, you need to protect yourself and your baby. Because Lucian won't protect you. He'll protect himself. He always does. If I give you proof, he'll know it was me. If you don't give me proof, you'll spend the rest of your life waiting for him to decide you're a liability, Evelyn countered. Is that what you want for your child? A father who keeps you both hidden like shameful secrets? Or worse, a father who decides you're too dangerous to keep around? The email arrived at 2:47 a.m. Evelyn was still awake, sitting in the library with her laptop open and a pot of coffee growing cold beside her. She'd sent Lucian a text hours ago saying she had a headache and was sleeping in the guest room, a lie he'd accepted without question because he was too busy celebrating with his business partners to care where she slept. When her phone chimed with the notification, her heart jumped. The email was from an address she didn't recognize, but the subject line was clear: everything you asked for. Evelyn opened it with hands that had gone suddenly cold. Layla hadn't just sent proof. She'd sent a complete documentary of betrayal. Text messages stretching back 14 months. Hundreds of them. Lucian telling Layla she was beautiful, that he couldn't stop thinking about her, that being with Evelyn was exhausting but necessary. Layla responding with declarations of love and increasingly desperate questions about when he would leave, when they could be together publicly, when their child would have a real father. Emails discussing the Brooklyn apartment. Lucian's instructions to his lawyer about setting up the shell company. Wire transfer confirmations. The lease agreement signed under a false name. Financial statements showing monthly deposits into an account in Layla's name. Receipts for jewelry, clothes, a car. And photos. Dozens of them. Lucian and Layla at restaurants outside the city where they thought no one would recognize them. Walking through Central Park early in the morning. In bed together, intimate and tender in ways that made Evelyn close her eyes against the evidence of how completely she'd been fooled. At the bottom of the email, Layla had written a single sentence: I'm sorry for everything. I hope this helps you. Protect yourself. Evelyn forwarded the entire email to Rebecca, then sat back and let the reality of it wash over her. 14 months. While she'd been planning their future, Lucian had been building a second life. While she'd been defending him to skeptical friends and family, he'd been laughing about how exhausting she was. Her phone rang. Rebecca, despite the ungodly hour. You got it, Evelyn said instead of hello. I got it, Rebecca confirmed. And it's better than I hoped. The financial trail alone is enough to raise serious questions about money laundering and tax evasion. Combined with the affair evidence, we have everything we need to trigger the morality clause and destroy his corporate control structure. So we confront him. No, Rebecca said firmly. We wait. We let him think everything is going according to plan. Meanwhile, I'm reaching out to some federal contacts. Because Evelyn, I think your fiancé's problems go much deeper than infidelity. What do you mean? Some of these shell companies, I recognize the patterns. They're not just for hiding assets from a future wife. They're structures typically used for money laundering. If Moretti is moving dirty money through legitimate real estate developments, we're not just talking about a divorce. We're talking about federal crimes, Evelyn finished. Exactly. And that's good for us. Because if we can show he's been using his relationship with you, your reputation, your contacts, your legitimacy, to facilitate criminal activity, then you're not just a betrayed fiancé. You're a victim. And everything he's built becomes tainted, unusable, toxic. Evelyn thought about all the years she'd spent introducing Lucian to her world. The investors she'd vouched for him with. The politicians she'd brought to his fundraisers. The charity boards she'd helped him join. If he'd been using those connections to launder money, to build a criminal empire behind a legitimate facade. What do we do now? Now we build the case. I'm bringing in a forensic accountant. We have 36 hours until the wedding. I need you to act completely normal. Don't give him any reason to suspect. And after? Rebecca's voice went cold. After, we destroy him. Saturday morning arrived like any other day, except it wasn't. It was Evelyn Cross's wedding day. The suite at the plaza was chaos, a beautiful, expensive chaos of florists and makeup artists and bridesmaids and a mother crying happy tears that would turn to shocked horror in just a few hours. Evelyn sat in the center of it all, being transformed into a bride, while her mind calculated every move of the game she was about to play. "You're so calm," her mother said for the third time, dabbing at her eyes. "I've never seen such a serene bride. It's like you don't have a care in the world." If only you knew, Evelyn thought. If only any of you knew. The dress was everything it had been at the fitting, perfection incarnated in silk and lace. The makeup artist had made her look luminous. The hairstylist had created something that looked effortlessly romantic but had taken 2 hours to achieve. She looked like a bride from a fairy tale. She felt like a warrior preparing for battle. At 2:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to begin, Evelyn's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Federal investigators are at his office right now. Simultaneous raids on 3 shell company locations. Freezing assets as we speak. It's happening." Evelyn typed back, "Perfect timing." She stood, smoothing down the dress one final time, and looked at herself in the floor-length mirror. "It's time," the wedding coordinator said, peeking into the suite. "The guests are all seated. The groom is at the altar. Are you ready?" Evelyn smiled. Not her practiced smile. Not her serene bride smile. Her real smile. The one that meant war. "I'm ready." St. Patrick's Cathedral was breathtaking. 500 guests filled the pews, turning to watch as the massive doors opened. The orchestra began playing. Light streamed through the stained glass windows like divine approval. And Evelyn Cross walked down the aisle alone. She'd insisted on that, told everyone she wanted to walk herself into her future, toward the man waiting at the altar. Lucian looked perfect. Tom Ford tuxedo. Hair perfectly styled. That smile she'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. She walked toward him, her train flowing behind her like water, like destiny, like justice. When she reached the altar, Lucian took her hand. His eyes were warm, loving, completely unsuspecting. The priest began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." "Stop," Evelyn said. The word echoed through the cathedral. 500 people went silent. "Evelyn?" Lucian's smile faltered. "What?" "I need to say something," Evelyn said, her voice clear and steady, projecting to every corner of the cathedral. She turned to face the guests. "I need to tell you all the truth about the man I almost married." Lucian's hand tightened on hers. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" She pulled her hand away and took a step back. 6 years ago, I met Lucian Moretti and thought I'd found my fairy tale. A brilliant, ambitious man who needed only the love of a good woman to become the best version of himself. I spent 6 years introducing him to my world, vouching for him, helping him build his empire. I believed in him. I trusted him. I loved him. Her voice didn't waver. Didn't crack. 3 days ago, I discovered that our entire relationship was a lie. That while I was planning our wedding, he was sleeping with my assistant. That while I was helping him build legitimacy, he was using my connections to launder money through shell companies. That I wasn't his partner, I was his tool. His way into a world that would have rejected him otherwise. Gasps echoed through the cathedral. Lucian's face had gone pale. Evelyn, you're being dramatic. Am I? She pulled out her phone. Should I play the recording of you telling Layla, my assistant, who's pregnant with your child, that I'm exhausting but necessary? Should I read the emails where you discuss how to keep your affair hidden? Should I share the financial records showing how you've been using my reputation to facilitate criminal activity? The cathedral erupted. People were standing, shouting questions, pulling out their phones. Ladies and gentlemen, Evelyn's voice cut through the chaos. The federal government is currently raiding Lucian's offices. Freezing assets. Building cases for money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. The man I almost married isn't a legitimate businessman. He's a criminal who used me as a shield. She turned to Lucian. His face was a mixture of rage and fear. You were right about one thing, she said quietly, just for him. I do see exactly what I want to see. I saw a man worth saving. Turns out I was just seeing my own reflection of what I wanted to believe. You'll regret this, Lucian hissed. You have no idea what you've done. Oh, I know exactly what I've done. Evelyn smiled. I've dismantled your empire. Destroyed your legitimacy. Made sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. And thanks to the morality clause in our prenup that you were so clever about, I now have voting rights in your company while you've lost control. Congratulations, Lucian. You played yourself. She turned and walked back down the aisle, her head high, her train flowing behind her like a victory flag. Behind her, chaos erupted. Security was trying to restore order. Guests were swarming Lucian with questions. Somewhere, sirens were approaching. Evelyn walked out of St. Patrick's Cathedral in her wedding dress, climbed into the waiting car where Rebecca was waiting with champagne and legal documents, and didn't look back. How do you feel? Rebecca asked. Evelyn considered the question as the car pulled away from the cathedral, from the life she'd almost lived, from the man who'd almost destroyed her. Free, she said. I feel absolutely free. Evelyn Cross stood in her newly expanded design studio, looking out over Manhattan. The city that had almost destroyed her. The city where she'd almost lost herself. Cross Design Collective had doubled in size. Clients were lining up, wanting to work with the woman who'd taken down one of New York's most powerful men with nothing but evidence and strategy. Lucian Moretti was in federal prison, awaiting trial on charges of money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. His empire had collapsed. His name was toxic. Layla had delivered a healthy baby girl and was rebuilding her life with Evelyn's help, not because Evelyn had forgiven her, but because the baby didn't deserve to suffer for her parents' mistakes. And Evelyn? Evelyn had learned the most important lesson of her life. She picked up her phone and recorded a video, planning to post it later. Someone asked me yesterday if I regret not going through with the wedding. If I wish I just confronted Lucian privately instead of destroying him publicly. Here's what I told them. For 6 years, I made myself smaller to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. I ignored red flags because I wanted to believe in love. I sacrificed my own instincts because I thought trust meant blind faith. I don't regret the public confrontation. I regret the 6 years I spent doubting myself. The greatest betrayal wasn't Lucian's lies. It was my own willingness to ignore the truth. So here's my advice to anyone watching: trust yourself. Your instincts are there for a reason. Love shouldn't require you to ignore evidence or make yourself small. And if someone treats you like a tool, believe them the first time. The wedding that never was became the life I was always meant to live. Sometimes the best thing that never happens to you is the thing that almost destroyed you. She posted the video, turned off her phone, and went back to work. Thank you for staying with Evelyn's story from beginning to end. If this story moved you, touched you, made you think about trust and betrayal and the power we all have to rewrite our own narratives, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. Comment your city so I can see how far this story of justice and redemption travels. And most importantly, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's making themselves small. Someone who's ignoring their instincts. Someone who needs permission to choose themselves. Because the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be anyone's tool. More stories coming soon. Stories of courage, revenge, redemption, and the extraordinary power of ordinary people who refuse to stay broken. See you in the next one. Flexed bicep sparkles. Life lesson. The greatest betrayal is self-betrayal. Evelyn's story teaches us that the worst betrayal isn't what others do to us, it's what we allow them to do by ignoring our own instincts, making ourselves smaller to fit someone else's vision, and choosing to believe beautiful lies over uncomfortable truths. Trust should never require blindness. Love should never demand that you ignore evidence. And no relationship, no matter how perfect it looks from the outside, is worth sacrificing your sense of self. The lesson: your instincts are your first line of defense. Listen to them. Trust them. And never, ever make yourself small for someone who sees you as a stepping stone rather than a partner. The real power isn't in revenge, it's in choosing yourself, even when love tries to convince you not to.